how familiar does this scenario sound to you? You spend all day studying for the big exam. Then it comes time for you to recall that studied information and take your exam, only to find out that you did much worse than you expected. There's got to be a better way. And fortunately for you, research in the field of cognitive psychology has uncovered several studying strategies that can improve learning overall, 6 of which I'll be discussing in today's short workshop. The first strategy to improve your studying habits is the encoding specificity principle. This principle refers to improved recall of information when the encoding and retrieval processes occur in the same environment. For example, if you sit in the exact same chair in class every single day, then sit in that same spot to take the exam, you should have better recall than if you sat in a different spot in that classroom. And this effect actually was supported by Duncan Godden and Alan Baddeley in their experiment where 16 scuba divers either encoded and retrieved a list of words in the same environment, such as encoding underwater and then retrieving underwater, or into different environments, such as encoding underwater and retrieving on land. And the results showed that divers had better recall when performing both tasks under the same conditions. So it's also important to mention that these matching conditions can be physical, like underwater, on land, just, your environment, or mental, such as, being in a happy mood when learning and then being in a happy mood while retrieving. But do not get this confused with our next studying strategy known as mood congruence. This takes more of a focus on the actual information being encoded and how congruent that information is with your mood while learning it. So, let's say you are upset in your American history class that day, and the topic of the material is the Great Depression. Mood congruence will say that you're going to learn that information better than if you were, let's say learning about a celebratory moment in U.S. history, such as U.S. independence from Great Britain. And the main difference being that one topic matches your mood at the moment while the other does not. So the Great Depression matches you being upset while U.S. independence does not have that similar congruency. Gordon Bower actually studied this effect and found that 80% of the facts that were recalled by readers who were sad at the moment were about a sad character in a story, and 55% of the facts recalled by happy readers were about a happy character in a story. And these results are depicted in the figure to the left. Next, we have the spacing effect. This effect is essentially telling you to stop cramming before the exam no matter how much you want to do it, and instead spread out your studying over a series of spaced sessions. So, for example, I like using this technique you see on the right called the Pomodoro technique. And essentially this was developed by Francisco Cirillo using a tomato timer that you would see in a kitchen, let's say. That's how he started, and then it's grown into this larger concept that people are very familiar with. And essentially it makes use of the spacing effect by allowing for work breaks in between your sessions of work. So this could mean, as you see on the right, 25 minutes working and then 5 minutes off, not working, relaxing. Or it could mean double that, so 50 minutes on and 10 minutes off. It just depends on what works best for you. This may seem slightly unnecessary, but a meta-analysis conducted by Nicholas Cepeda and colleagues consistently found that distributed practice schedules led to better performance across 184 different articles. So they definitely covered a wide range of research on this topic and found consistent results. Now, in terms of what you should be doing during those spaced study sessions, the next strategy, known as retrieval practice, is going to recommend that you focus on testing your knowledge of the information as opposed to restudying it again and again and again. For example, my psychology professor understands the importance of retrieval practice, and he actually assigns us weekly quizzes to test our knowledge of the material that we learned from the previous week. Now, even if your professor doesn't assign these sorts of quizzes to you, you can always test yourself by making flashcards or studying and then writing down everything you remember on a blank sheet of paper after. And this strategy of studying and then writing down what you remember was actually proved to be useful by Karpicki and Blunt in their study on retrieval practice, which essentially found that this method outperformed restudying strategies where you read and read again and read again. Another strategy to improve your studying habits is through mnemonics, like the peg word technique. This strategy involves memorizing a list of rhyming pegs with some visual aspect to them, and then giving each of these pegs an item from a list of information that you're trying to memorize. So I understand that can be a little confusing. So for example, let's say you're in an American history class, and in this class they're asking you to remember the original 13 US colonies. First, you're going to want to memorize all of those pegs that you see here on the right. So just for example, 1 is a gun, 2 is a shoe, 3 is a tree. Anything that rhymes like that can be used to help you remember. And you're going to want to go to 13 in this case, since there's 13 colonies. Now, let's say you're trying to specifically remember Pennsylvania as being one of the original 13 colonies. Well, you might take your first peg of 1 is a gun, and then you're going to apply that to Pennsylvania. So you might say 1 is a gun, cracking the Liberty Bell. And then let's say for the next peg, you're doing 2 is a shoe. You could remember New York as another colony by simply remembering 2 is a shoe in Times Square, and so on. And you'll just keep going, anything that helps you remember. And Gordon Bower and Judith Reitman really found that this technique helps reduce the effect of retroactive interference, which is when memory for new items interrupts memory for old ones. So this essentially allows you to remember a longer list of items than if you were trying to just remember all 13 off the top of your head. And lastly, studying strategy number 6 is something called self-reference. Here, we're talking about the brain having better memory for information that can be connected with our own lived experiences. For example, you might have a good memory for the definition of classical conditioning from your Psych 100 class from a few years ago, simply because you connected it to your dog running up to you every single time you shook a bag of treats, since that dog has now connected the stimuli of getting a treat with the sound of a plastic bag shaking. And in fact, Karen Hartlep and Alfred Forsyth conducted a study on self-referencing, where participants were either asked to make use of self-referencing methods by connecting pieces of a child psychology textbook chapter to their own childhood, or they were given no special instructions at all. And as it turns out, the group that was asked to make use of self-referencing had much better recall of information from that textbook than those that did not. And with that, this concludes our workshop for today. And I want to thank you for listening and hope that you are able to put some of these strategies to good use. And in my book, even if you just adopt one strategy from today, I consider that a huge success. And I hope you do as well once you get that big exam back and you see a nice big A+ on it.